Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining this panel discussion at Data Points Summit. And the topic of this discussion will be top trends in supply chain optimization in 2022. And for the session, we actually have a great lineup of participants. We have Pushprash Shukla from Microsoft, who is a senior director of data science there. Then we have Sanjay Mehta, who is the head of e-commerce industry at Lucidworks. And finally, we have Jingjin Zhao, who is a senior machine learning scientist and engineer at Amazon. So first, let us go through the brief round of introductions. And by the way, my name is Ilya Katsov. I'm VP of Technology at Grid Dynamics. So Pushprash, would you like to introduce yourself?
Thanks, Ilya. I lead the AI and machine learning group here in Microsoft. We are part of what we call the business applications group as a part of Azure offerings. Uh, I think customers or users will popularly know our products as the dynamic suite of products and the Power Platform, Power Apps, Power BI, etc. So my team runs the data science models that run behind the scenes. Um, and this topic is very interesting because part of my team actually delivers data science models for supply chain insights and also the process optimization and asset insights area. So very excited to be here. Thanks for having me and looking forward to learning from you all as well.
Yep, thank you. Sanjay, would you like to go next?
Sure. Yeah. Hello, everyone. Sanjay Mehta, and I'm from Lucidworks. In my role as head of commerce, my responsibility really is to work with customers focused in retail as well as selling direct to consumer and B2B. Lucidworks primarily is focused in cognitive search, both for commerce and enterprise. And we do have hundreds of customers who are retailers or in the e-commerce business. So that my perspective there, especially with supply chain, is many of these organizations like to leverage supply chain data into these sort of actionable outcomes that you experience from an e-commerce experience perspective, such as merchandising, personalization, as well as obviously the feedback loop is very interesting from what's happening on these e-commerce sites and feeding it back into the ML and AI and overall intelligence and insights the organization has. So excited to be part of this conversation.
Thank you. And Jingjin, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'll make it short. I'm Jinjin, and thanks for having me here. I am a scientist and also an engineer at Amazon, and currently leading a team of scientists and engineers building up machine learning solutions in various applications. And I have had a few years in Amazon's supply chain optimization organization. So things like dealing with the supply chain network, how we could automate and optimize to make it more efficient.
Thank you. All right, so let us get started with maybe I would say a rather trivial question. Obviously, over the last couple of years, pandemic impacted supply chain to a very large extent. It is well known that there were many disruptions and other issues. So I wonder how it, in your experience, how did pandemic change the supply chain optimization priorities and processes in the companies you work with, and how they basically reacted on all these different disruptions, and to which extent optimization was helpful or not helpful in handling these issues.
I can.
Yes, please.
I think everyone knows the effect pandemic had on the whole world. It kind of affected, it was the coming together of so many events and kind of a collection of anomalies the world had never seen. I think the world was operating under known distributions of data, like how things flow, understandable, like they changed a little bit, but not like this. I think everything got affected from factories and people working in it to production to bottlenecks like silicon chips, etc. And um, pretty much, I kind of compare it to like the world knew that when we used to drive before maps and traffic maps came along, we knew that traffic maps were important and they would help us, but we were still okay, with our handheld maps, and we were okay with the routes we used to go to. And if you reached a point where an event occurred where suddenly there were bottlenecks all around the world, on the roads, and you suddenly felt like, man, this is the time I needed that Google Maps with traffic on, right? And so I think companies were kind of looking at their digital transformation or the digital twin, a representation of their supply chain, but they were hit so hard with the kind of anomalies that happened that it just accelerated the need for more visibility, um, and more resilience in the supply chain. Like, it kind of just everyone is thinking, I need that map in my hand so I know this thing reaches me soon enough or not. Um, and it's not just about machine learning or data science. It's about the data, the representation of the data, you know, um, speed at which the data flows, more than anything else.
Mhm. Jinjin, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And from short-term perspective, I really think like how can the companies, the logistic companies, to stay flexible, to be able to adapt and survive at the first, right? We need to survive. Like it's the time to fix the bug, to solve the ad hoc request. And from longer term, like how can we thrive as a whole? I mean, we need better accountability, trust, the visibility, transparency, all those things. A better mechanism that can connect all of us together and work on the problem all together.
In our experience, actually, one observation that I would like to share is that, as we all know, in supply chain, a lot of optimization processes, they are based on ability to forecast the demand. And, obviously during the pandemics, it was, very, very tough problem, and a lot of corrections were needed for for pretty much any forecasting models. And I've seen like a lot of companies that were struggling with that. And, because without reasonably accurate forecast, you pretty much cannot do, optimization of, stock levels and replenishment processes and so on. Yep. So Sanjay, what do you think about that? Did you see like the same or?
Yeah, I've seen it across many of our customers we work directly with, and we're going to build on talking about the resiliency aspect of kind of having a way to mitigate some of the bottlenecks, for example, right, which is coming up with alternative means to receive and ship goods, right, and having redundancy or other alternatives. I've seen it where customers have a backup plan for even the types of products they may offer, right, as an alternative, so that they're not essentially losing the customer, right, but having kind of a really relevant alternative to present. We've seen some customers essentially starting this whole, especially in e-commerce, right, starting kind of the whole or extending the Black Friday season altogether, right? You've probably seen it start earlier and it's still running, a week later, and so I think a lot of that is extending it to give them a little more time, right, to fulfill, but also, have like maybe you might have seen less discounting as well, like as compared to what you might have seen before, right, to kind of slow down some of the demand as well.
So you basically seen like the shrink of assortment, and in order to to manage it more efficiently.
Part of that, yep.
Yeah.
And I would say even changing distributions of demand from, like, people were doing more online before, and looks like this last week, like, there's the first time in many years people have done more physical shopping than online shopping. So, and new trends like ship to store versus ship to home versus shopping in store, and all these channels kept changing a lot, driven by how the pandemic was and how the vaccination was going, etc. And that definitely, to Ilya's point, the demand signal across channels change constantly. and it was just hard to keep keep up with it.
Mhm. And do you expect this trend to continue in 2022? I mean, I think there is a kind of, at least from my perspective, there is a kind of trade-off between resilience and efficiency. You can focus more on, building up resilience and, making your decisions to improve, for example, your lineup of suppliers, or as Sanjay just said, to optimize your assortment in a way that it kind of supports resilience. But traditionally, the focus in supply chain was on efficiency, how to get products more quickly, cheaper, faster, and so on. So do you expect in probably over the last 2 years, the focus was much more on resilience rather than efficiency? I don't know if you agree with that or not, and do you envision, how do you envision this to continue in 2022?
So your question is about resilience versus efficiency in the years to come.
Yeah, basically, yes.
It's hard to distinguish. I mean, to my point, like I think the difficult thing here is how do we know what we need, understand the vulnerabilities in front of those tough situations, and how much flexibility we need in terms of infrastructure, labor, or the product we're making. And then we understand like how we can reduce the risks by strategies like diversifying the upstream, downstream dependencies, and try to avoid single sourcing and to have those global, local, regional strategies to fulfill those demands. And also think about the security level. We need to increase that, like how much safety stock we need to have to deal with that kind of situation. And always to have like plan Bs, plan Cs. In the end, I think the tech innovation. So automation, optimization, AI, all kinds of technologies could help, then we should definitely leverage them. So it's like a combination of resilience and efficiency. If we can do things more efficiently, then we'll have better resilience. And if we have good resilience, then we could achieve better efficiency. So that's my point of view.
Oh, that's actually a very interesting point. So basically, so do you expect that, for example, after the pandemics, supply chains, they can become more resilient and more efficient at the same time?
Yeah, because people started thinking about, right? We need to be flexible. We need to be open, like human as a species. We need to be open, be flexible. And people start to innovate. That is how humans are different than other species. And the tech innovation will definitely contribute to better resilience and efficiency, I think.
Yeah, I see. That's interesting. So, Pushprash, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I think from my point of view, all the customers I talk to right now are worried about just resiliency more than efficiency at this point in time, or like rather, you know, there were some. I was reading about this Christmas tree manufacturer who knew that this would happen a year ago, and typically it took them 6 months, and they started a year ago, and they are still about 20% short. And so I would say both resiliency and efficiency, but both driven by visibility as the key pillar. And in the sense, uh, like I have to launch a new product next year. Is should I start now? Right? Should I start 2 months from now? It kind of starts all the way there, and I guess I think right now people are worried more about the resiliency. I think once the current sort of bottlenecks go away, it'll come down more to efficiency. But the I think my personal take is it will be driven more by like representation of the physical processes in the digital world, having a visible layer on top, and some what if scenarios like driving business decisions, right? I think that at the core of whether it's resiliency or efficiency as a scenario, or just basic what ifs discussed in strategy meetings, right? But driven by data. I think that's kind of the uh, where it's headed, in my opinion.
And Sanjay, what do you think?
Yeah, I think I kind of agree too from what I've been observing, where efficiency is sort of always going to be a goal, right? That's continuous, and everyone's trying to achieve. And obviously, in light of all these events, more folks at least we've been exposed to have been focused on being more agile, resilient, to accommodate all these unknowns, right? And I think this idea of what if and scenarios it is something I think a lot of folks have attempted in the past, and even now. It's just, again, there's so many unknowns that keep creeping up, that arming yourself to be a little more agile, turning production up and down very rapidly, or switching suppliers or carriers really rapidly. Those sorts of agility aspects is what I see a lot of our end kind of customer, vendors, sellers employing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you. And actually, I wanted to follow up on what Pushparash said regarding the visibility of the inventory. Actually, this is one topic that in my experience also very very common, and I was constantly surprised and amazed by how low visibility actually in many retail and manufacturing companies, because when we start to talk to them, the typical situation is that companies, they have visibility only into some aspects of inventory. For example, they might know their on-hand inventory but do not know their in-transit inventory, and so on, and it negatively impacts obviously the efficiency of their supply chain optimization and inventory optimization, because, for example, if you do not know your in-transit inventory, you cannot promise it to customers, right, safely, and so on. And there are many other issues related to visibility, like different calculated statuses and everything, and there are a lot of discrepancies around it. And so basically, it seems like across the industry still a lot of issues. Even before we come to optimization itself, there are a lot of issues with foundation of this optimization, with what kind of data we have in place, how well it's consolidated, how consistent it is. So I wonder if what's your experience about that? Because it's basically like we cannot even talk about optimization in a data-driven way until we have these issues resolved in many cases.
Yeah, I like the topic of visibility. I think we're talking about similar to transparency. How can we work as a whole, not individually? So in terms of the good thing about visibility, I actually have questions around like what are the challenges, how we can overcome those challenges in order to provide a transparent environment for each players. So the first thing I kind of have been thinking about is the privacy, like how transparent we want to be and in what situation, how to design the policies that can ensure each player has the privacy they need, because we don't want to share this like the price or marginal benefit, right? Each company wouldn't be comfortable sharing that. So how can we build up an environment people are willing to share what they want to share and build up the trust, and so that each player can collaboratively contribute to this whole network, the mission.
Mm-hmm. And you do you mean like information from suppliers that can be leveraged, for example, by retailers to optimize their decisions, things like that?
Yeah, it's like the end-to-end supply chain, the network, from raw material to the end product. So how each player and the competitors on each stage or step, they want to share, because it's a collaborative process from the raw material to the end product. A lot of collaborations need to be happening. And then how can we share things we should share because we don't want to duplicate the effort, right? So a shared network, and also reduce the duplicate network, and also free some of the labor to reduce the cost definitely, and also provide a safer environment as well.
I see. And by the way, I'm curious, do you expect that blockchain, for example, can change this significantly? Because I think there are like a lot of attempts to create, this kind of safe data sharing environments using blockchain for supply chain.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, blockchain is, but it is not the only solution. I would say it's not like every situation would need blockchain. Blockchain can solve some of the problems, and we need to be prudent if we want to use blockchain. Still design those policies to have those permissions right at the right place, so players can join without worrying about things they don't want to share. So we need to have those limited access, and we need to define what kind of access we want to limit to whom, things like that. But definitely blockchain can be one of the solutions. But sometimes I think a lot of areas they've already had that kind of trustworthy relationship with each other. I mean, around the players. Then I don't think blockchain still needs to be there. Because what I see from blockchain is the ability to create a place people can trust each other. It's not like 100% transparency, it's just the trust.
Yeah, I think, and we have a parallel that exists in the fraud detection or fraud protection world already, where there is a lot of parties which come together, often competitors, or in spam detection, for example, or in security, for example, where they share secrets just because it benefits everyone.
Yeah,
In this case, there is no fraudulent or like uh, malicious party involved, but like there are these malicious events involved, which are, or like these unfortunate events involved, which is affecting everyone. And I actually agree. We call it the consortium idea, where uh, building on what Ilya was saying, I think your what we call L1 or like level 1 suppliers, but you don't know your level 2 and heading up as far as you could go. Um, but if there is a data provider out there which can actually, I do see that the role of data providers will increase going forward, like because a lot of some of this information is public. It's just hard to extract and verify and provide. um, but if you can definitely, if there is a platform that can convince multiple parties uh, that they will benefit, that their suppliers privacy will be upheld, and only the computations done on top in a federated way, in a privacy preserving way, will help in giving you better predictions or early predictions or things like that. I think it might be a fairly attractive concept, if not to the biggest companies out there, definitely to the tier 2 companies out there. And yeah, there's value in, I think the pandemic has shown there is value in sharing this data. Just no one wants to share it out in the open, and so you need kind of that clean room or privacy preserving sort of federated learning concept driven by someone.
Yep. Sanjay, what do you think?
Yeah, I think working with folks who are dependent on suppliers, having more as close to real-time visibility of their processes, such as whatever they're sourcing raw materials, but also manufacturing visibility, where are things in the actual production process is something that's very important. When we're working with actual brand manufacturers, they have that sort of leg up, right, where they own the manufacturing potentially sometimes, or they're contracting out, but when they own it, they have sort of that direct visibility into what's occurring throughout the entire production. Also visibility, we're seeing more where you're able to, the visibility from shipping, for example, cargo tracking, and for example, having products that might be subject to ambient conditions, thinking about products that have expiration or are sensitive to temperature or humidity, those sorts of things. Having those types of data points and visibility, I think is key. So if we look at the entire sort of chain from production to shipping, and having more transparency is definitely a goal of everyone. We know who's selling, for example, products.
And I'm curious, what about visibility inside the organization? So we talked about this visibility across like suppliers and buyers of inventory, but it seems to me that there are also a lot of challenges related to how properly process different inventory updates within the organization. Even if you nominally control the environment, you still not necessarily have full visibility into your inventory statuses. And in particular, I would be curious how like IoT sensors and computer vision technologies can change that, because again, in our experience, for example, we've seen some examples that are companies adopt, for example, computer vision to track inventory in the warehouses more efficiently and so on. So I wonder, do you envision this type of technologies to play more increasingly important role in the future? What's your take on that?
Anyone wanna go first? I'm always excited about technology. So
some things I've seen in my days in ERP and supply chain manufacturing was more instrumentation in the manufacturing floor, such as the equipment having some intelligence built in. I think we're looking at some more embedded AI now, right? But even all the equipment, even on the manufacturing floor, having that tracking built in and that visibility is something. Having computer vision applied there, I think is kind of a big one of kind of looking at what's happening throughout the floors. One, and then to throw it on the other end, on the demand side, the demand forecasting. There's pretty interesting things we see in e-commerce and retail, right? Which is like detecting trends, scanning social media, using visual tracking of fashion trends, color, pattern, style, fit. Really cool sort of things from that perspective. So those are some interesting things I've seen so far.
Mm-hmm. Yep, thank you. So Pushprash, Ginger, what do you think?
Yeah, I think that it's inevitable that IoT and assets area, and it will combine with the supply chain. I think the question is, I think there is a platform question and there is a scenario question. But I think it's already seen in the demand space in some sense. Like, companies used to pretty much deal with like a product level, transaction level data. And then once they started looking at every website click and things like that, like just the area of personalization and opportunity to do better predictions opened up. So I think the granularity at which you can go into the data, the finer grain you go as data scientists, we all know that it's better, right? It leads to better predictions, leads to better insight, leads to better what if scenarios. And that's what I see in supply chain in some sense. IoT and computer vision driven uh, data inflow is kind of giving you that finer grain data into manufacturing and supply chain that you don't have today. And in some sense, that's every company can control that, right? It's you're not dependent on others. You are in control of your own destiny there. Uh, uh, so I think it's going to happen. How soon it happens, I think, depends a lot on companies' maturity to uh, you know go on to platforms and cloud technologies and kind of infrastructure rather. But it is going to happen, and those companies who do it faster will probably benefit. Is how I look at it.
And those are exciting technologies, IoT, computer vision, and we also need to be rigorous when we're applying them. Like as a scientist or as an engineer, I always look at them. They're 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 amazing, but sometimes they can get crazy. Just like if we have those data shared across, then we need to consider security, right? What if like everything is connected, and how we can prevent bad things from happening? What if the data has got altered or extracted, things like that? We need a robust solution to ensure we have a safe and good environment, and also how reliable. Like there was I think electricity power off in Bay Area, and oh, it's the internet, so everybody cannot access the internet, and we don't know what is happening. So things like that. How can we ensure it's reliable? Do we have Plan B, Plan C's? And for the computer vision, I would say we need to be careful about the accuracy, right? And also the thing the machine is doing, we need to be careful. Is it really doing the thing we want? Like explainability, interpretability, all those hot topics. And of course, the stability. Can we reproduce the result or things like that? But I mean, as an engineer, I was concerned about how can we tackle those things in order to deliver an environment everybody can be happy.
What about you, Ilya? What do you think about this space and these sources coming together?
Well, I think computer vision, in my opinion, it definitely will play important role in like production processes and supply chain processes, because there are, a lot of beneficial use cases. For supply chain specifically, it's definitely there are benefit around improving the efficiency of warehouse optimization, simplifying tracking inventory, but also, for manufacturers, there are a lot of related use cases, for example, quality control, defect detection, and I think that these companies, once they basically do not have choice other than like master computer vision technologies, and once, even if they start with like most obvious applications such as quality control, once they become more mature in using that, they will I think will use it for supply chain applications as well. And they are already like using it, based on what I see. But also another interesting observation from my side is it can, to some extent, impact how companies are using like cloud resources, because many of these computer vision use cases, they actually require edge computing. You need generally edge servers to process this data. It's not always possible to do it efficiently in the cloud, so I think there will be some changes on that side as well. And I'm also curious. One of my next questions was around like more traditional analytics and optimization, in the sense of doing like better routing, better safety stock decisions, and so on. And this is a very old problem. People were using these techniques and algorithms for at least like 50 years, maybe more. And I wonder, do you see any any changes, or do you envision any changes going forward in this aspect of supply chain optimization, or you basically expect that people will keep using the same techniques that they used over the last decades or so?
I think I'll go first then. I think the topics could still be there, like the automation and optimization and continuous improvement and exact techniques. I think the basics probably could be the same, like the math, that is the tool we're using, and programming, that could be another tool we're using. But for the exact technologies, things would always be evolving. And from my point, I think one critical thing is how human can help a machine or human actor and machine actor can play the role jointly. So it's not like machine being a black box. How machine can help us see things we couldn't see, but also give us the opportunity to intervene if needed. And from the operation research perspective, how machine learning can help predict, let's say, forecasting problem. Because machine learning, let's say deep learning, we have so many neurons, we can do much more accurate prediction. And can we use that more accurate version as an input for the operation research so that we can derive more useful insight, things like that.
Sanjay, what's your take on that?
Yeah, I think a couple definitely like some of the old models and definitely prescriptive approaches are still there. I definitely see more folks moving towards predictive, especially in the commerce space where we have access to a lot of behavioral data. You're able to look at trends kind of in advance a bit and do some more predictive types of strategies. I think what's been interesting is more around transparency too, where we're able to think about like health data now. Like outbreaks, for example, are things we almost have in real time, and understanding that impact in these models, I think, is something that's pretty interesting. So there's this additional new inputs that we maybe never had before, or as fresh data as we've had before. And I think cloud is definitely opening the doors to things like multi-dimensional analytics, where you might take like supplier data points in addition to your demand and your own data points to build some more interesting forecast models than you had before.
Yep, thank you. Pushparash, what do you think?
Yeah, I have I think two views, a little bit contrasting, but maybe they come together. I think with visibility and sort of trust being a key question, right? Especially among decision makers. I think more explainable ML models, that say why the prediction was done and give you exactly the influencing factors behind it and some level of confidence. Uh, you know, I think no one wants to, the latest Zillow kind of forecasting errors kind of was an eye opener for a lot of people. I mean, but it can happen exactly like that in a manufacturing process, especially if you're launching a new product and you start off and you are estimating high demand or whatever, right? So I think focus on resiliency of or like robustness of the ML model and explainability as an important factor. I think will drive the manufacturing ML area quite a bit. On the flip side, I think we are probably at the uh, edge of like the data revolution in terms of size and scale of data, and especially with IoT and those those sources of data. uh, I think we might be at the tipping point where really finally like deep learning models or uh, deep graphical representations of the process become practical. We so far did not have this much amount of data, or we were storing it at a much higher grain where these things were not possible. So I think I fundamentally am interested in graphical neural networks and just generally graphical representations of the supply chain process. Um, Practically speaking, how much are they viable with the size and variety of data we have? So in some sense, explainability on one end and more complex model on the other. But I think there is probably a world where they will converge at probably their orthogonal axis, both improving.
Mhm. Yeah, from my perspective, actually, one observation is that I've seen a number of very interesting POCs around reinforcement learning in supply chain. And, I think there are like a lot of challenges with this approach. On the one hand, it's very, flexible because it's like a simulation based thing, but at the same time, it tends to produce like irregular policies, and there are, opaque ones. You cannot really look into them. You cannot, be sure what they are going to do, right? And there are issues with coordination of multiple agents and complex networks. But and from my perspective, it can be like very promising technology, because in general it allows to optimize very complex processes and in a very flexible way, essentially. So I wonder if you had any experience like that with reinforcement learning. Did you see somebody using it in practice?
Yeah, I see it a lot. We offer it as a part of our personalization service in Azure Cognitive Services, and it's used a lot in explore exploit kind of scenarios all around. I've seen used in supply chain. I've seen used in web optimization and things like that. Uh, uh, I don't have personal experience of particular customers how reinforcement learning was better than what they were using before, like comparison wise. Uh, but I absolutely agree with everything you said. I think it does kind of um, remove the complexity a little bit from and uh, help people adjust quickly to changing signals that they see in their data. But as far as a big success story and comparing it to other models, it doesn't come to top of my mind.
Mm-hmm.
What about you? Have you guys seen some example like that? I'm actually very curious.
Yeah.
Actually, not in supply chain, but my experience related to reinforcement learning is like it is a simulation tool, so it can help you find a path or find a solution, and you can use that to experiment. So it just helps you or design those experiments you want to run, and you can run experiment and find insights from them. So in that sense, I found reinforcement is pretty useful, and that is the difference between reinforcement learning versus other deep nets or things kind of like that. It's a simulation.
Yeah, but we see it definitely with e-commerce, where we have a wealth of user data available through signals. I think it's Chris Project mentioned as well. In the world of search, it's definitely used and does show very significant positive results. For example, when we observe sort of click-throughs of the way a model is presented a result, and a lot of folks will do sort of split testing type of man against the machine, if you will, and look at the performance that way. Personalization definitely is a big one. I mean, merchandising overall, is obviously a big one of how you present products. What order is definitely a big one where we see and observing these click through what positions people are clicking on, right, is a big one.
All right, so we, I think, like running out of time, so pretty much on top of the hour. So I think, we can probably wrap up. But I wonder if you have any like closing remarks, any comments. All right, we are good then. So again, thank you so much for joining this session. I think it was very insightful, a lot of interesting thoughts, and I also would like to thank everyone who joined this session at DataPoint Summit. Thank you, and have a good day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, folks.
Thank you. Bye-bye.